Priest Lake is a challenging place to survive. It's cold, remote, lonely, and dangerous. Yet little by little, the lake community has progressed, and it has often been a small handful of hardy souls who have stewarded that progress. The Kalispel and the Kootenai, the trappers, loggers, and miners, people like Coolin, Clockman, and Shipman. Each of them came for different reasons, but what united them was the struggle for survival. 11,000 years ago, 9,000 BC, Priest Lake was covered in an ice sheet half a mile thick. It melted slowly over a period of 1,000 years. When the ice was finally gone, Native Americans began using the lake. Stone tools and arrowheads show these early Priest Lake residents lived here over 5,000 years ago. The Kalispel tribe called the lake Chickali. This means the main lake of the Kalispel people.
Adley.
Yeah, that's the name. Adley Lake. That's the main lake. That's the main lake of our people.
The Kalispel and the Kootenai tribes didn't normally winter at the lake. They would come in the spring to net whitefish, often staying all summer.
Basically, the Kalispel canoes, it's a sturgeon nose canoe, pretty unique to our tribe. The frame's made out of cedar, the skin's made out of white pine bark, and the ends are closed off with birch bark. And it's basically lashed together with natural fibers, choke cherry. Wherever you were at, you could make one. A good Kalispel could make a canoe wherever he was at. It might have a crack, it might have a hole where there was a knot at, and they would heat up some pitch and just apply it right on.
The sturgeon nose canoe is unique to the Kalispel. It has a cedar frame with a bark covering that can be discarded, allowing them to carry just the frame when they travel.
They went over there for subsistence purposes, as well as what I mentioned earlier, the vision quest that sometimes they utilized on some of the islands.
That's where they go to get their vision quest, that little island. Sometimes they leave the boys there for one night. If they don't hear nothing, they leave them another night until they get what they're looking for.
To ready them means to have them spiritually cleansed, have their hearts and their minds cleansed and open for whatever that quest, that vision is going to be for them. That's all I can say about that.
J.R. Bluff is teaching Indian language. And I help him with some of the words. One time he came in my house and he told me, "Good morning, frying pan" in Indian. Frying pan.
That's great.
That's frying pan. Oh! You want me to tell it in Indian?
Yeah.
Wat je tak hebt samsiti etu sant en as hoe is het as etlus kadif en soetsen met knochen shetamant on shet was is testaminam tuntem Jesus hoe je ik ook is tak Chilus some slightly at hot up some slick good is hot
Now can you tell it in English?
Coyote came to a village and proposed to their daughter, turn him down. Tell me he's ugly and he's dirty. Go to another camp. Proposed, would you marry me? No. Then he'll move to another one. few places, and he got mad. I'm going to fix this river to flow up north so the salmon wouldn't come. And they don't want to marry me. They're not going to have no salmon.
But when the first white man ever came through here, the first Jesuit, this is where he found the Kalispel people. And right in here where we're standing.
I think the influence of the Catholicism on our tribe, I think it was pretty easily accepted. Our people were pretty spiritual anyway, praying to grandfather and animals, and that everything has a soul and it's got a power, and that tend to respect it.
Jesuit priest Father Pierre de Smet came to North Idaho in 1846. He named the lake Ruth Ann after his superior in the church. This was a name that failed to stick. The Native Americans couldn't pronounce Ruth Ann, so they started calling the lake Canuxu. This was their word for priest. Both of these names refer to a priest, so the early settlers began using priest as the name. The cry of gold in 1860 brought a rush of miners swirling across the state. By 1890, there were 2,000 miners roaming Bonner County alone. It was inevitable that one or two would find their way to Priest Lake. The earliest written record of Priest Lake is the Klockman Diary. This diary chronicles the search for the Continental Mine, which became Priest Lake's most successful mine. A.K. Klockman reports visiting Priest Lake in 1891. In its heyday, the Continental Mine employed 200 miners and supported a town of 350 people.
That's not 200 people, that's 200 miners. And a lot of them had kids up there, they had family up there, they had a post office, they had a school. It was called, at that time, it was called Klockman, Idaho.
Bonnie Smith's family lived at the mine the winter of 1921.
They dug tunnels into the houses.
Oh, it's gone. Wow.
And you could run on the crust, it'd freeze. Then you could run all over on the crust, and it was just a fun place to be. It was for me.
Indians had been visiting this site for years, carving bullets from an outcropping of lead and silver. They tipped Billy off to its location, and he spent the winter of 1892 guarding the mine from claim jumpers. He barely survived the ordeal and spent 6 months in the hospital recovering.
The Indians told Billy Houston about the mine, about this ore on top of the mountain.
That they melted for lead.
He went over, talked to Uncle Spence, and he grub-staked him. And they staked the mine, and they built the cabin.
Before that cabin, Billy spent a winter up there. The way the story was read to me, he actually stayed in caribou hides.
Yeah.
He was in caribou hide skin, he ate caribou meat, and he was in a caribou tent because he didn't have time to build a cabin, but he was afraid to leave because the claim had not been filed. Then Leonard Paul said when Coolin was Williams, Klockman and Williams went together and built this, and it must have been for the convenience of coming down our side.
Yeah.
And staying part way.
Well, they tried going down the Priest Lake side and then taking the waterway down. Well, that didn't work out. And so then they decided to come off the Boundary Creek side, and they packed it out with pack horses, and they would pack the ore up in rawhide bags. AK ordered horses all over the world
This is a clock.
and brought them here. A lot of the horses they had up in the mine, they kept them underground all the time.
All the time.
Because if they come out in the daylight, they'd go blind. They couldn't see what they were doing. There's horse stalls inside the mine, and the feed bunks and stuff are still in there. Later on, they started pulling up and down a mountain with bulldozers. They didn't have blades on them at that time. They pulled the sleighs and the ore cars with the cats. They called them the cat and the kitties. Then they started hauling it by truck. And that's how they always done it when I was there.
Today, the Continental is silent and the road to it is closed. Little remains of it from its heyday. There are no buildings left. Blue Joe Creek still flows down this beautiful valley, having seen men and their dreams come and go.
Her hair shone like gold in the hot morning sun. She took all the love that a poor boy could give her, left me to die like a fox on the run. Yeah, like fox on the run.
The Great Northern Railroad reached Priest River in 1892. This brought a wave of settlement to the area. Tourism started at Priest Lake around the turn of the century. The lake was a favored place for Spokane families to come on a rugged camping trip.
And of course, I had no money. I was a student, but my sister was working, so she paid for the cabin. I think that cost $25 for the week.
Leonard Paul opened his general store in 1906. For 20 years, the business thrived in a small log building on the water. But Leonard had bigger plans. In 1925, he started construction of a new store, which would also house a dance hall. This historic building, which opened in 1926, is Priest Lake's oldest business and has been in operation for over 100 years. The lake has received a number of fish introductions. Mackinaw trout was introduced in 1925, and in 1940 the kokanee was introduced. The kokanee became the most significant lake fishery until a decline in its population occurred in the 1970s. The kokanee spawn in gravel beds along the lake shore. Spawning occurs late in the fall. The lake level is a critical issue with regard to reproductive success, since a lake drawdown can expose spawning beds. However, due to changes in the drawdown policy, the kokanee are coming back. Each year since the year 2000, the number of spawning pairs has doubled. This brings bald eagles to the lake. They come for the excellent fishing. The young eagles don't develop their distinctive bald head until they are a few years old. These young eagles love to harass their parents. In this shot, an adult eagle is taken off his perch by a young upstart. The original route from Priest River was called the Old East Trail. It was a footpath that was widened over the years to accommodate a horse and buggy. The trail passed by Prater Halfway House and on into Coolin, a distance of 30 miles. The trip would take all day. In order to go any further, you needed a boat, as Coolin was the end of the road. The main link between civilization and early life on Priest Lake was steamboats. They help expand settlement at the lake through daily mail and passenger service. The first steamboat on Priest Lake was the Kenixu. This was followed by the W.W. Slee. The Slee was a stronger and faster boat that people came to rely on.
The steamer was so big that it couldn't get close to the beach. And it had a big gangplank. Our luggage and the people were left on the beach, and he took off for another point on the lake. That's how you got there.
Siniaquatin was another boat used on the lake, as was the Firefly. The Ridley was a towing partner of the Slee, and here is being used at the outlet of Indian Creek. Then came the Tyee and the Tyee II. These boats were used to tow logs down the lake in preparation for the spring log drive. Logging was hard work. Teams of horses were used to haul the logs. Sleighs were used in the winter. Log flumes were built down the major creeks to deliver logs to the lake. Diamond Match Company started the Priest River log drives. The first one was short, just 3 miles. But within a few years, the annual log drive would cover the entire 66 miles of the Priest River. Taking advantage of the spring snowmelt, the log drives would start in early June. The drives were a chance for the men to prove their skill.
17, 18 years. He says, I never lost a man. But years ago, I was back in the 20s. He was an Indian from New Brunswick, and he was very clever on the stuff, as they said, and he was brilliant. He's out there, and all at once he disappeared. And he never came back up. They think he must have had a heart attack or something, because it wasn't his nature to even fall off one log.
This is where the flume ended in the Priest Lake, right in Indian Bay. These fellows have a sort of a code, and they're wet all day long, and they get their feet wet, and sometimes they fall in. However, it doesn't count as a fall unless they lose their hat. There, a fellow fell in, but he didn't lose his hat, so it didn't count against him. These fellows develop what they call squeak heel from having their feet in cold water, and this is the 1st of June usually when they started this drive. And this water is ice water. It's interesting that these fellows were in a sort of a hazardous situation most of the time, but very seldom did you ever have a serious injury on this job. These fellows were pretty adept at working this bateau across the rapids. In all the years that we took care of them, nobody ever fell in or the boat capsized. It's interesting how this bateau is, even though it's a small boat, is quite seaworthy in these rapids. They have one of these bateaus at Newport now in their museum. We're going to work on this jam that's out in the middle of the river now. The way they proceed on this is for a man to jump out with a rope, and he holds the bateau. Then, as he works the logs loose and the log jam gives way, then they all jump for the boat. Sometimes they make it, sometimes they don't make it. They all made it this time.
The Great Fire of 1910 burned 5 million acres and caused a worried nation to build a system of lookout towers. These were manned in the summer months and were used to pinpoint a fire's location. The 12th of July, 1926, was the start of the worst fire season in the Priest Lake area. Overnight, a lightning storm ignited 240 individual fires. These lightning fires combined and swept northeast. The weather continued hot and dry for many days. Some of these fires continued to burn all summer. When the rains finally came, and even snow in the high country, over 100,000 acres had burned. The fire of 1926 missed a few isolated pockets of cedar trees. These cedar trees are between 500 and 3,000 years old. The first resort on Priest Lake was Forest Lodge, which opened in 1914. Forest Lodge hosted Nell Shipman and her movie crew during their first winter at the lake. Bert Van Tuyl was her director. They had an ongoing relationship that was well hidden at the time. He froze his foot while filming a night scene, and it always bothered him. During their third winter at the lake, gangrene set in and Bert went crazy. At daybreak, he took off down the lake. Nell and another man followed Bert, helping to get him to Coolin over the dangerous ice and then on to the hospital in Spokane.
Inspired by nature, yet fighting against it, Nell Shipman created silent films at Priest Lake in the early 1920s. Here she found real snow and a beauty and majesty that Hollywood could not duplicate. Her films have recently been reissued and give us a glimpse of early Priest Lake. She moved her entire production company, including a zoo of 70 animal actors, to the north end of Priest Lake. She managed to last 3 winters there, even though the lake was in a deep snow cycle. She proved herself as a writer, director, and star of her first 3 films. This early success influenced the stories she would tell throughout her career. Her films are noted for strong, self-willed heroines, capable as she was of great deeds. Her motto was, "The picture, anything for the picture." Nell's son Barry acted in many of her films. He learned the meaning of this motto when he was just 10 years old. In one scene, they were dog sledding across the frozen lake and fell through the ice. Barry kept trying to scramble out of the frigid waters, but Nell held onto his jacket to keep him in a little longer. For her, the picture came first. Along the way, she developed a love for animal actors and spoke out against their inhumane treatment in movie making. She refused to use cattle prods, tripwires, or whips to force her animals to perform, which was unique in her time. Her rapport with the animals in her film is one of her most remarkable and admired attributes. In the end, it was financial problems that overwhelmed her. She gave her animals to the San Diego Zoo and walked away from Priest Lake forever.
In January of 1920, Prohibition became the law of the land. For 13 long years, alcohol was illegal, and bootleggers rushed in to fill the void. Local character Pete Chase used to supply his moonshine to the Davenport Hotel in Spokane. He labeled his product Uncle Pete's Monogram,